Hi, welcome to Veterans Nation. Today we have a two-part episode. We're going to be interviewing Mr. Paul Sullivan, a Gulf War veteran turned lawyer and advocate for veterans. The information that he provides is critical for every veteran to be aware of.
From the law firm of Bergman and Moore, LLC. They're back in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C. And the name of their website is vetlawyers.com. And that is exactly what they do and who they are. Paul Sullivan, hello, sir.
Hello.
Paul, this is Rick Seaman, co-producer of the Veterans Nation show, and I'm here with my illustrious anchors, Mike Dowling, U.S. Marines OIF, and Kelly Smith, U.S. Air Force pilot OIF OEF.
Pleasure to have you on, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Paul, we recently received a press release from the House Committee on Veterans Affairs regarding Gulf War illness, which the Institute of Medicine now refers to as CMI, chronic multi-symptom illness. This press release, it amounts to really nothing more than an exchange of dialogue between the Institute of Medicine and Congress. So here's my question, sir. In 1992, we got the Agent Orange Act, which laid out the foundation for disability compensation. Of course, it took over 20 years from the time the herbicide spraying was halted in Vietnam, but it listed 11 presumptive conditions that could be compensable if the veteran claimant had the so-called boots on ground criteria. Now here we are in 2013, 20 plus years since the unofficial end of the Gulf War. And do we have anything as defining as the Agent Orange Act of 92 for Gulf War veterans today?
Yes, we do. And it's very important that veterans know that there are several laws to help out Gulf War veterans. Now, we just need to give a bit of a history lesson, and this is going to be a surprise to a lot of listeners out there. The Gulf War began on August 2, 1990, and it never ended. There was a temporary ceasefire in 1991. However, to the present day, all the way through here, March in the year 2013, the Gulf War continues.
You know, Paul, can I just make one quick point on that I think is really important, because we're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Iraq War, but a lot of people are saying that the Iraq War has never ended. So I'm really glad that you just brought that point up in regards to the Gulf War.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that's true. And here's why this is really important, guys. Because the Gulf War continues, all of the laws that I'm going to mention that the Gulf War veterans fought and died for after we got home from Iraq the first time apply to Iraq War veterans who are serving today, and everyone who served in what's called Southwest Asia from August 2, 1990 all the way through the present, until Congress or the President actually officially, finally, once and for all, declares the Gulf War over. Would you like me to give a list of some of the laws?
Yeah, Paul, and before you do, this is Rick. You mentioned that everything applies to the Iraq veterans that applies to Gulf War. What about Afghanistan?
That's a really good question. For some endemic diseases, Afghanistan War veterans have been added to the definition of Gulf War veterans. However, for most of the benefits I'm going to talk about, Congress and VA have not acted to roll in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and the other nearby countries for benefits for Gulf War veterans. That's one of the things that Gulf War veterans are fighting about that I don't think Iraq War veterans have caught on to yet. So that's a good point. So let me give you a quick list of some of the things that Gulf War veterans, and that includes all Afghanistan veterans and all Iraq War veterans and some Afghanistan War veterans. Let me start with the first law for Gulf War veterans. It was passed in 1992, and it required that the Department of Veterans Affairs set up a registry for Gulf War veterans who were sick and monitor their health care and benefit use. I want to let you know that after 1992, VA bureaucrats became so adversarial toward Gulf War veterans that it wasn't until the year 2000 that the Department of Veterans Affairs began monitoring the health care use and disability benefit activity of Gulf War veterans.
I just want to make sure I understand that clearly. You implemented a law in 1992, but they didn't start to monitor the law until 2000. Is that right?
Close. The Congress passed a law, the President signed it, and it ordered the Department of Veterans Affairs to identify and monitor Gulf War veterans. However, the Department of Veterans Affairs did not implement the law until the year 2000. In other words, a full 10 years from the start of the war is what it took VA to start paying attention to how many Gulf War veterans were coming in VA's doors looking to see doctors or filing disability claims. That's a tragedy. That's a disgrace.
Sure is.
Now let's shift to the second law. Because so many Gulf War veterans were falling ill, Congress passed a law in 1994 that set up a really unusual system. If, under the new law, a veteran could show he or she was ill and the doctor was unable to diagnose the veteran with a conventional condition like bronchitis or something else like that, or a neurological problem, then VA could grant the claim, begin paying the veteran benefits, that means monthly disability compensation, and provide the veteran with free VA health care that comes with a service-connected condition. An important note here, we all have to know that veterans in 1994 could not receive free VA health care unless the veteran had a service-connected condition approved by the Veterans Benefits Administration. Okay? Then here's what happened. The VA claim system collapsed on Gulf War veterans. VA was denying 95, 96, 97% of the Gulf War veterans' disability claims. The VBA simply refused to grant benefits for a condition a doctor couldn't diagnose. So because VA completely crashed and burned on helping out Gulf War veterans, the veterans organized a group called the National Gulf War Resource Center, and I was honored to serve on the board of directors and as the executive director. In working with a bipartisan group of congressmen and senators, we crafted what became known as the Persian Gulf Veterans Act of 1998. That law was based on the Agent Orange Act of 1991. And the law set up a system like this. Congress gives money to VA. VA signs a contract with what's called the Institute of Medicine. They're part of the National Academy of Sciences, and they provide expert, objective scientific opinion to the executive branch of government of the United States. And VA, in this contract with IOM is supposed to look for medical conditions that are associated with a Gulf War veterans deployment to the area known as Southwest Asia. That's Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the bodies of water nearby, and a couple other countries. Well, that all sounds great. The Gulf War veterans clapped. Everybody thought we did a good job. We also had two other provisions of the law that are very important. One was Congress created what's called a mandated advisory panel. This research advisory committee was supposed to report to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs so that VA didn't repeat the lessons, the mistakes of the Vietnam War and try to block research and block treatment and block benefits. Well, here's what VA did. VA refused to implement the 1998 law, and VA refused to create the Independent Research Advisory Committee. The one good thing that VA did from the 1998 Persian Gulf Veterans Act was open up the doors for 2 years of free health care for anyone who's a Gulf War veteran or who deployed to a war zone. That's 2 years of free health care at a VA hospital. That part of the law was implemented. Now, here we are, fast forward to the year 2002. The 2 years start on the date the veteran is discharged from active duty. So the veteran may have served in the Gulf War from 1990 to 1991, or served in the Gulf War from 1993 to 1994. Okay, so as soon as a veteran has deployed over to the Gulf War area, you check that box. Okay, then when the veteran discharges from active duty, not the date that they redeploy back to the States, but the date that the veteran discharges from active duty, the veteran receives 2 years of free health care from VA. So if the veteran, no matter when they went to the war zone, if the veteran got out in 1998, the veteran would receive free health care from 98 to the year 2000. That's a great piece of legislation. And that law was modified, by the way, in the year 2008 by President Obama when he was a senator, and former Secretary of State Clinton when she was a senator, and Senator Kit Bond, a Republican from Missouri. They put in an amendment to the Dignity for Wounded Warriors bill in the year 2008, and that 2 years of free health care was extended to 5 years of free health care. So what that means is anyone who went to any war zone overseas since 1998 gets 5 years of free VA health care, and the clock starts the day after the veteran is discharged from active duty. So that's a huge benefit that the Gulf War veterans fought for that now applies to any veteran forever until that law is changed.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it was nice to work on that. But let's get back to what's happening to the Gulf War veterans, and it's a disaster. Remember how I mentioned that Congress ordered VA to contract with the IOM to look at medical problems among Gulf War veterans?
Yeah.
Well, here's what VA did. VA did not do what Congress ordered VA to do. VA signed a contract with the Institutes of Medicine, but the contract limited the IOM to only looking at human research studies. Well, you and I know, everyone with any knowledge of science knows, you can't subject a human to experiments on chemical warfare agents, radioactive depleted uranium, massive doses of pesticides, terrible prolonged exposure to oil well fire waste and pollution from 700 burning oil well fires all at the same time in Iraq and Kuwait. So Congress ordered VA to consider animal and human studies. However, when VA contracted with the IOM, VA only asked for human studies. And what that did is it severely limited the Institute of Medicine's ability to find medical conditions associated with deployment to Southwest Asia. Let me give you a clear example. There are now stacks of research that show that radioactive depleted uranium, that's a toxic waste used in tank rounds and helicopter rounds. It's great for piercing armor. I've seen it in the Gulf War battlefield as a scout with my own eyes. The stuff really works. However, it's radioactive and toxic dust. Well, the research shows that DU dust is implicated in birth defects and cancers in laboratory animals. However, VA, by limiting the contract with the Institute of Medicine, prevented the Institute of Medicine from reaching any conclusions about depleted uranium. Therefore, the Institute of Medicine said, due to a lack of information, we can't tell if depleted uranium is related to Gulf War veterans' illness. Now, do you see how VA is manipulating science?
Sounds pretty suspicious to me, Paul.
Yeah.
In the year 2007, when this came out in congressional hearings, the VA employee responsible for that abruptly left the agency.
I don't blame him.
So I want to let you know that clearly.
Okay, folks,
came
that's
out.
it for part one.
Now get to
Stay
the
tuned for part two with this critical interview that we're conducting. If you want to watch part two right away, you can go to the Veterans Nation archive, which is on veteransnetwork.net, and you can watch it right away. Stay tuned.